Hey Indian Creek 8th grade students, it's Professor Blazek, and I'm here today to talk to you about Stave 1 in Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. This is going to be a reading companion video, one that you can watch either while you're reading the story or after you're reading the story as a way to review important characters, important plot developments, and just really help reinforce your understanding of all of the things that are happening during this story. So let's jump right in. So some things in your stave that I asked you to consider while you were reading this first stave were the priorities of the different characters. This is something that's very important in characterization, what they want, because as we talked about when writing a story, it's always important for a character to want something. All of their actions need to have a reasoning for it. So some of the characters we're going to talk about that you can look at their different priorities include Ebenezer Scrooge, our main character, Scrooge's nephew Fred, the gentleman who come to borrow, and there are a number of other different characters that you can look at their priorities as well. We also talked about Scrooge's dislike of the poor, which plays a major role in the story. It's a large reason why he is the way that he is. Also his issue with Christmas and why he feels this way, because he feels very strongly opposed to Christmas. And again, it's important to understand why. And finally, the message that is given to Scrooge by Marley, or more accurately, Marley's ghost, because this is what really sets the rest of the plot of the story in action. So those are all very important things to keep in mind while you're reading. So some of the important characters that are introduced in this stave include, first and foremost, Ebenezer Scrooge. He's our main character. He's the one we're going to be following for the majority of the story. And just some quick background on him. He's the owner of Scrooge and Marley. It's a counting house, like a lending house. He is the perfect example of a miser, and this is something you'll hear him referred to as quite often. He is a person who hoards wealth and spends as little money as possible. He is very well off, but as you can see throughout the story, he does not want to spend any more money than he absolutely has to. He cannot stand the idea of Christmas because in his mind, a lot of people spend their money on frivolous things like gifts, celebrations, food, all these things that most people think of as just part of Christmas. Christmas is meant to be a time of celebration, family, gift giving, but in Scrooge's mind, a lot of people, especially poor people, are wasting their money, for lack of a better way of putting it. And if it were up to him, there would be no celebration of Christmas because he just can't stand what it does to so many of the people that he sees. And as we sort of touched on before, he also has a great deal of dislike for the poor, and he feels that they alone are responsible for being poor. He has no sympathy for those who are less fortunate, and he feels that they do not deserve charity, they do not deserve money. It's basically, if they're poor, it's their fault, and they should be forced to living in prisons or poorhouses or on the street. And to him, poor people are just basically on their own. And that also, I think, goes along with his life as a miser, because he is going to keep all the wealth that he has. He has no inkling of giving any of the money that he has to help those who are less fortunate. We also meet Bob Cratchit, who is Scrooge's clerk. He himself is a poor man, but he loves Christmas. Even though he doesn't have very much money, he wants to make Christmas the best that it can be. He wants to celebrate with his family because Christmas means so much to him. He works for Scrooge, and he has a very large family to provide for. So he does not have the easiest life, but he represents so many of the good things that poor people can be. And it's something that Scrooge cannot see. He has no understanding of the type of person that Bob Cratchit is. All Scrooge sees is that Bob Cratchit is poor, and therefore he must not be a very good person. We also meet Scrooge's nephew, Fred. He is a very kind young man. We meet him when he comes by Scrooge's office to wish his uncle a Merry Christmas and invite him to Christmas dinner. Scrooge wants nothing to do with his nephew because his nephew is, just like Bob Cratchit, very much in love with Christmas. And Scrooge asks Fred why would he love Christmas so much, because he is poor and Christmas hasn't done anything for him. To which Fred replies that even though Christmas has never put any money in his pocket, he feels that the love and the celebration that Christmas embodies is enough to make Christmas worth dedicating himself to. Now, we also meet two gentlemen who come into Scrooge's office and ask him for a donation to help the poor during Christmas. These gentlemen aren't named, so we're just going to call them the borrowers. Scrooge, as you would expect from his character, refuses to give them any money at all, saying that the poor should be sent to prisons or poorhouses, or if their only choice is to not go to prisons or poorhouses and just live on the street and eventually to die, Scrooge says, well, if they're going to die, then they better do it. So this, again, is another example of people who Scrooge just cannot stand. These are gentlemen who are well off and are dedicating their lives to helping those who are less fortunate, which, as you know, Scrooge has absolutely no interest in doing. And then finally, we also meet Jacob Marley, or more appropriately, Jacob Marley's ghost. Now, Jacob Marley was Scrooge's former business partner, and he had died 7 years ago on Christmas Eve. And he visits Scrooge towards the end of the stave, his ghost, and says that he has been forced to walk the earth wearing this chain that was forged by all of his sins, all of his greed, all of his cruel actions towards the poor, towards the less fortunate, and he is now being punished for all of those actions in the afterlife. And Marley warns Scrooge that Scrooge himself is going to experience the exact same fate when he passes on, and that the only chance that he has is to listen to the advice given by 3 more spirits who are going to visit Scrooge over the next couple of days. So he is basically sending a warning to Scrooge, showing him, this is what's happened to me because I was so cruel and heartless, and this is exactly what's going to happen to you if you don't change the things that you're doing. So this is just a basic overview of some of the things to keep in mind as you're reading and some of the characters that you're going to meet as you read. I'll be back soon with another video on Stave 1, looking at some of the important passages and some of the important questions that you should be asking yourself as you're reading. So for now, this has been Professor Blazek, and I will see you soon.